Hello and welcome to Demian Allan Astrology and Tarot channel. If you like the channel, please subscribe to it and press the like button if you like the current video. And this is the monthly forecast for the 1st of June 2021. And what I like to do is just go through the month, look at the key dates astrologically, what we can expect, maybe some of the features and themes that are going to play out over the course of the 4 weeks. So I've cast the chart for the 1st of June, 6 a.m. in England. And I'm recording this actually on the 26th of May. So we just had the lunar eclipse around about the late morning UK time. You know, just a word on eclipses, particularly the solar or lunar eclipses, they tend to last about 6 months, the effects of them, if they're hitting a sensitive point in your natal chart. So, you know, planets, particularly in mutable signs, 5, 6, 7 degrees in the mutable signs of Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, might be affected by this particular lunar eclipse that we've just experienced. And it's worth noting here, lunar eclipses tend to bring things to a conclusion or endings, but with endings like the great circle of life, there's new beginnings as well. So things might be coming to a close, but not like today or over the next couple of days. It will occur over a 6-month period. It also, lunar eclipses tend to magnify the emotional energy around, and this is in the polarity point of Gemini and Sagittarius as a mutable quality, which is a changeable quality generally. So just a little note on the lunar eclipse. Okay, so here's the 1st of June. So that's going to be next week. And let's just have a look at some of the themes that are playing out here to start off. So first of all, you can see the sun is at 10 degrees in Gemini, and it's just coming off the separating conjunction with the North Node as well. That's a nice little start actually to the month. We've also got Mercury in Gemini. Now, this is kind of interesting because Mercury is, you know, been going retrograde in late May time and remains retrograde at this particular point. So it sort of hangs at 24 degrees. It's gonna go retrograde, and it only goes direct around about the 22nd. So Mercury retrogrades, right? Okay. If you know about profections and you're in a Mercury profected year, then obviously you've really got to look out for the Mercury retrogrades. They're going to be more intense than normal. Having said that, at this time, this Mercury retrograde is also slowly going backwards towards Neptune, which is going direct. So we've got a square aspect between Mercury and Neptune. Now, whenever these two planets get together, it clouds the thinking process or the communication process, particularly from a political, economic, sociological point of view. So you might get sort of, it's the smoke and mirrors syndrome here. So Mercury rules all forms of communication. So you expect things to go a little bit iffy, to make that pun, at this time, and it may be that the media is depicting things that we have sort of looked at the past and we're still going back over. I always kind of do this. I always look to the previous Mercury retrograde, and that was in February, and it was at that sort of Aquarius sort of note. So I always kind of look to see what sort of happened previously in February, the last Mercury retrograde. It was in another air sign, so again, full emphasis on communication, ideas being put to use. But what's interesting is there's a direct, natural trine aspect between the Gemini and the Aquarius. So ideas that kind of are being produced this time could actually prove really kind of quite worthwhile in the future. So I don't look at Mercury retrograde as this kind of dread of, oh my God, you know, don't go on your computer, don't update your phone, all this kind of stuff. And it is in its own sign, Mercury, of its rulership. So it can function to some extent. When you get a Mercury retrograde in, like, say, Pisces or Sagittarius, that's when it becomes really difficult, because in the sign it cannot function very well. But this one, it can. So that's kind of, so that's always worth noting. And, you know, on this day, the 1st of June, we've also got the moon just separating from making a trine aspect to the Mercury. The interesting thing is, if we talk about retrogrades, we got a couple of things kind of going on here. Saturn. Now, you know, Saturn went retrograde on the 23rd of May last month, and it's sort of sitting at 13 degrees. And obviously, Uranus is at 12 degrees, so it's forming that by 1 degree that square aspect. That's the common theme throughout 2021. Here, that tenseness is really being drawn out at this particular point in June. So it's just to look out for that. That's intensifying the more revolutionary ideas coming together with the more traditional structures. So those two are really significantly playing out here. I would also look at Mars, 23 degrees in Cancer. Now, there's a lot of different types of astrology that will look at weather. I do tend to look at Mars, actually. I'm a bit of a Mars fan for looking at and predicting the weather. And, you know, here in the UK, we've had some pretty awful weather. It feels like spring has not really sprung yet. And this would include that it's not quite heated up. Now, the interesting thing is, on the 12th of June, and I will look at that later in the video, Mars will go into Leo, and that's when I expect the weather to really heat up, actually, and possibly of a heat wave. Leo is a fire sign, it's a fixed sign, it's sustained, and Mars will be traveling there for a couple of months. So that should give you an indication when the weather really kind of picks up here. But because it's in a cardinal quality, it changes quickly. The weather, Mars in a water sign, rain, you know, it's not the best combination here. What it's doing is it's actually applying an opposition with Pluto here. And when these two get together, expect things to slightly go into a difficult period of instability, and a period when we will all see perhaps the unsightly in society come out. It has quite violent sort of tendencies, these two, when they oppose, but I'll come into that a bit later on, actually, here. So we see a lot of planets in Gemini, as you'd expect, and we still got Jupiter 1 degree in Pisces at the 1st of June, and that's still going direct. Okay, let's have a look at, let's move this forward a little bit for ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to move to, let's do the 8th of June. So we can see how things are playing out. We've got Venus now at 6 degrees in Cancer, and here it is, just off the back. So around about 6th and 7th of June is when the opposition occurs from Mars to Pluto. This is early morning on the 8th. It's just sort of separated. So yeah, I would say, yeah, 5th, 6th, 7th of June, pretty intense, actually, in the world, related to how we kind of move forward. The two zodiac signs that are in place here are Capricorn and Cancer, and they relate in the natural zodiac to the home, the family, as the Cancer, and Capricorn is the work aspect. So we expect this to kind of clash in principles and morals, and what's the best thing to do with these two. These two really are going to cause problems. Cancer doesn't work, Mars does not work well with Cancer. you know, it's in its fall. It cannot operate. So Mars is, I've often talked about this in the videos, that Mars is not in a good position, being in a good position for a long time. And when it gets into Leo, you know, that will be when Mars can finally start to be able to do something, because it really has not for some period of time. But so this opposition, to me, is a close of a chapter in a way, which goes back to early July 2020, when Mars went into Aries and really started to have got problems. So we have not had a Mars that's functioning. This is the culmination of it. And in terms of world events, that could bring out a whole new set of different circumstances that's playing out there. We can still see the square aspect between Uranus and Saturn that's playing out. And we have Jupiter at 1 degrees, 56 minutes in Pisces here. And the retrograde, of course, of Mercury is still occurring, and it's still making that square aspect with Neptune. Myself, I'm inclined to say that the first early part of June is a little bit sort of all over the place, really, in terms of information and what we're receiving, in terms of how we're feeling about the future and where we're all going with this. This feels like it's going to be a little bit challenging at this time. We're probably trying to put plans into place, but find it very, very difficult to do that. It's making decisions on quicksand constantly here. And what's happening is that Mercury is combusting towards the sun. So when it's the old Icarus effect, really. When Mercury gets too close to the sun, or when any planet gets too close to the sun, it gets burnt up by the sun. It cannot function. And so Mercury is hurtling towards the sun. And that always means that that planet is suddenly, almost like it disappears from the sky. It doesn't function as well. You have to really work on it to access it. So we're in for a little bit of a period that is a tricky energy here. We're also just approaching a new moon. As you can see, the moon in this particular chart is in Taurus. If I just move forward a day, maybe another day, maybe 2 days. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna, you know, that's on June the 10th. It'll be late night, won't it, in UK? We at 20 degrees. We have the new moon, where the moon and the sun are both at Gemini, is at around about 20 degrees. So that's when it will, the month sort of kicks into gear here. Before that, you're in the dark moon stage, so it's all a bit kind of quieter. And again, that smoke and mirrors effect that's coming on here. So this is June 11th. So you can see the moon's separated from its new moon cycle, and is waxing in power. We've got Venus at 10 degrees in Cancer. It's still making a trine aspect with Jupiter, but by 8 degrees. And we can see that Mars is hovering on that 29 degrees critical degree. It's knocking on the door of Leo. This is when we might begin to find that weather starts to change into more of a stabilizing situation. In fact, if I just move this forward, we can see that, you know, so that's the 12th. So that's when I expect maybe the weather to stabilize and become much more summery, or what you'd expect. Leo in the northern hemisphere is obviously the rules the time of late July and August, and Mars is in there, heats up the energy of Leo. So yeah, and if you're in a Mars perfected year, again, this might be a really nice period for you. You might feel the energy of Mars working to your favor a little bit more. So yeah, and it's not in that, in my method using the whole sign house system, it's not in that opposition with Pluto, so it's in another sign, so it's not touching the Pluto, which I think for the first 12 days of June, I think that opposition between Mars and Pluto is really destabilizing. for a lot of us here. Mercury is still retrograde, 19 degrees, and it's gone past the sun's moved forward and Mercury's moved back, so it is starting to separate. The sun is at 21 degrees, so that might things might seem a bit clearer at that time. We've also got this thing about, you know, travel and stuff like this. I've said this in previous videos. This is where it really is going to go a bit up and down. So the North Node is in Gemini, which is short distance traveling in the natural zodiac, so that would be okay. But it's the South Node in Sagittarius, which is typically the sign of, you know, long distance travel. So when you have so the South Node in there does cause problems in that particular area, and the ruler of Sagittarius is Jupiter, and that's squaring by 8 degrees, but it's still squaring. So the long distance travel is going to be a real problem at this particular junction. And again, the smoke and mirrors kind of thing really coming out here. So that's where a sort of a difficulty is going to kind of lie. We can see that the square between Uranus and Saturn is still dancing away there. But yeah, I often think that the Sagittarius themes of long distance travel, higher education, that means universities and stuff like this. This is not running smoothly. This is not falling into place with a South Node in there. Things are not going according to plan at all. Short distance travel, schools, you know, up to the age of 16, maybe up to 18, sixth forms, I think they'll be fine with the North Node in Gemini. Might be a little issue around that because of the Mercury retrograde, but Mercury doesn't it gets to 16 degrees before it starts stationary and moving direct, so I wouldn't say it was deeply effective. But the long distance travel, universities, higher education, real got problems throughout the year actually, and it's accentuated during June because of the issue with the emphasis on Gemini as well during this particular month. Okay, should we move forward? I think we shall. So one of the things I'm going to look at, and one of the days that I'm going to look at, is the 21st, because in the UK, that's when we meant to come out of a full lockdown here. I just want to look at this particular day here. This is obviously the summer solstice as well, so but the symbolism is fantastic, really. You've got the sun in Cancer. Okay, so the solstice is all when the sun goes into Cancer. You know, we have the longest day of the year. Okay, now let's just look. Mercury is still retrograde. Still retrograde. It's about to start to move direct the next day. So that's quite a strong kind of energy of things moving forward. We've also got Jupiter that on the 20th went retrograde as well in Pisces. So again, that emphasis on long distance travel is really tricky. You know, that would definitely put delays on that time. On that day, we got the moon in Scorpion. The moon is never really clever on Scorpion. It's making opposition with Uranus, so it's a bit sort of all over the place. I think collective viruses. I'm Pluto myself, and I think, you know, Saturn has some aspects of that. You know, and I think Mars as well. I think Mars, as I said, Mars has not operated too well. Mars is at 5 degrees. It's applying a square aspect to Uranus. It's opposing Saturn, and in that day, it's squaring, even though the moon's separated, squaring the moon. So, you know, we've got that kind of energy of the 4 points of the fixed signs The 4 squares really intensifying this day. So I would imagine that there's a sort of there's a real battle between sticking with what we know and going in uncharted territories a little bit here. And looking at this, we've got any other aspects that are going on here to mention. I mean, you know, the Venus is making a trine aspect to Neptune, so that's quite a nice aspect, but not enough to really kind of make decisions on. It's just quite nice. I would think probably that things are going to start to open up here on the 21st, or that's the plan, and that's what I think is going to happen. But I do think there's going to be some restrictions or some fear that's going to come into place as this fixed cross comes into force here. That means that when Mars particularly, which I'll look in a bit later, gets further down the line and making it much more intense, there may be a kind of an issue around the decision on the 21st here. That's my kind of sense around this. The moon is still waxing, but it is coming up to the full moon stage as well. So let's just go a little bit forward here. But it is a key date. It's on the summer solstice, of course. So it is, yeah, absolutely key date here. So I'm just going further down the line, June of 26. Okay. So we've just had the full moon. The full moon is at 24 degrees. So that would have been the day before, 25th, opposing about 3 degrees. Now here it is. We got that Mars, so that's now intensifying in the square. It's 4 degrees away. It's also coming into intensifying with Saturn here, and this is a fixed element to it. Also, we've got the moon approaching Pluto. That's not going to be too dramatic. It's going to be for a couple of hours, really. For, you know, well, actually more than about 6-7 hours. That's going to make an impact, so I'm not too concerned about that. Obviously, Mercury is now moving forward in Gemini, so it can do its stuff, and I think that Mercury is the real key to all this. It moving forward just after the 21st. So I think that's probably the buying and selling things opening up again. Retail doing very, very well there. I just think there's this kind of, it's that fixed element, the fixed signs dominating, and the fixed signs are the dominating factor of, we all want to come out of, well, majority of lockdown. I don't know, some people might not want to, that's fine. But I do think that there's a sort of a gamble here. And remember that Cancer, the sun is in Cancer, is a cardinal sign. It wants to do stuff. Cardinal signs, they initiate stuff. They're the first point of the season's change. So we're into summer, and the sun goes into, in the northern hemisphere, when the sun goes into Cancer. So it wants to get things going. But what I think is happening here is that there is still these limitations imposed. So the social distancing, I'm not so sure that will be completely dropped at this time. I think that there will be still some rules that will be applied, even if they are slightly redundant, just because of the fixed quality of nature that's going on. Obviously, Jupiter retrograde, I think, is a big thing, because I think with this optimism about travel happens sort of particularly from the 14th of May, when Jupiter went in. And speaking, I mean, I'm recording this on the 26th. I know there's loads of people suddenly gone to Spain and all that kind of stuff. But when Jupiter goes retrograde on that sort of 20th of June, that's when I think you'll see that the long distance travel suddenly becomes a major issue or difficult to do. So I think, you know, that's the symbolism of it. Okay, let's just move forward to the end of the month. So June the 30th, what do we end on? We end on with a very strong opposition with Mars and Saturn. God of War meets the Father of the Sky. That's problematic for men in authority figures on the political scene, actually, at that time. What else have we got? We've got Mars also applying a square to Uranus. I just think there's going to be demonstrations, going to be problems, there's going to be people rebelling against restriction. I think it's going to be a little bit of a very tense time. And, you know, I don't think things are going to go according to plan at all during this particular period. I think there's a real kind of difficulty at this. We've got Venus now in Leo. That's also forming an opposition with Saturn in a square with Uranus. Pluto is now going retrograde, so that's going backwards. So if you've got any degrees on the cardinals around about 22 degrees to about 28 degrees in the cardinal, which are Aries, Cancer, Libra and Capricorn, then you're going to be affected by Pluto and any sensitive on planets on those degrees. Then you're affected, you'll feel that energy suddenly shift for more internal process more than anything. Weather looks pretty good. And then you know, we got the nodal axis still at 10 degrees hovering again. So, and the Mercury is at Gemini 18 degrees because it's been retrograde. So, you know, you know, that Gemini is still moving forward. I think is kind of the blessing of all this period here. But there is an optimism, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think that's very, very strong during this particular period. There is an optimism because of the Mercury factor. But yeah, the Mars opposing the Saturn, squaring the Uranus, this is going to bring out some big, big changes at this time. It really is. And I would assume that, you know, people are going to find this a little bit of tricky energy to deal with on a collective level. Tense, aggravated, things not moving fast enough. Why do we have to keep these restrictions in place? Why do we? There's the kind of the feelings here that we're going to get. In terms of like, one question I'm sure I'll get is about vaccines and stuff like that. You know, to me, I think there's two planets that I want to bring in, which is Mercury and Mars. And I think like because of the Mars factor going into Leo, I think that will obviously help the vaccine process, as well as when Mercury goes direct at the end of June. So I feel like, you know, that's going to get stronger and stronger, the vaccine process, actually, in terms of that. But you know, it's gosh, there's so much going on during this particular month, and I think it's really kind of important that we all remain as optimistic as we can during this particular period in time, because it is we're going through a huge amount. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video. Do subscribe and press the like button, and I will see you all very soon. Bye-bye.